Comics Recapped here. Today, I'll be explaining a comic called Carnage. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The story starts with Detective John Shayde arriving at a fur factory. An anonymous caller gave them a tip that a foul odor was coming out of the factory. Detective Shayde and his partner Booth immediately smelled the stench the moment they came near the area. The two detectives went inside the factory to investigate it. To their horror, they found a deceased man hanging upside down in the middle of the factory. They gasped, and Detective Shayde was quick to determine that this was the work of the artist. Booth asked why he was so sure. He replied and told his partner that the way the body was arranged gave it away. John also noticed that the dead man's stomach was bloated, and suddenly it burst open, releasing hundreds of butterflies. The detectives noticed that a symbol was formed using his blood, but they didn't know what it meant. Elsewhere, Kenneth Neely, also known as the artist, was working on his latest captive, Dave Speakman. Kenneth told Speakman a story about his father being a mortician, making the dead more beautiful than they had ever been when they were alive. As a child, Kenneth would often come to his father's work to watch. He often asked why the dead needed to look beautiful. His father would always reply by saying, "All things must be beautiful in the kingdom of God." Unfortunately, his father died of leprosy at age 65. His father inspired Kenneth, but he didn't learn how to become a mortician for God. He did it to be noticed by the one he idolized. Kenneth got his wish as Carnage appeared. The next day, John was called to head to the hospital to follow up on a lead about the artist. He saw Booth, who filled him in about how a bleeding man was rushed to the hospital. The man told the emergency team how he escaped a killer attack, saying the killer would give him a beautiful death. The detectives went inside the man's room, whose name was actually Dave Speakman. John asked him questions and Speakman answered all of them. He told them how they talked about his father and how he died of leprosy. John took note of this and Speakman gave additional information. He said the killer was talking with somebody, but he couldn't recognize who it was. Kenneth was on his knees, saying he heard the news that Cletus Kasady was no longer Carnage's host. Without any reservations, he volunteered himself to Carnage to become his next vessel. Carnage didn't give him an answer and instead told him how he missed Cletus. But still, he acknowledged Kenneth's effort in showing his work, which prompted Carnage to show him his work. Carnage took Kenneth to the South Bay Industrial District and showed him his project. Kenneth was impressed seeing Hydro Man tied up and captured. Carnage used his powers to enter the insides of Hydro Man, reaching his molecules and atoms. He gathered everything that enabled Hydro Man to become water and took it for himself. Carnage told Kenneth that he had just taken the first step in finding out his own meaning and his own beauty. Meanwhile, John relentlessly studied every file and determined that the only man whose father was a mortician who died of leprosy was named Kenneth Neely. He told Booth that he would check on a few hunches based on the files. Back on South Bay, Carnage told Kenneth about how serial killers took trophies from their prey after they killed them. He looked at the piece he took from Hydro Man and declared it his trophy. Carnage then absorbed it and transformed. He turned his attention to Kenneth and asked why he would take a host who doesn't even fully understand his own endeavors. Suddenly, John busts through the room with a gun. Carnage was impressed by John's desire to charge at them despite knowing the danger he faced. He used his powers to grab hold of John, telling him that Kenneth had a lot to learn from him. John was dying as the energy expelled from Hydro Man made his body fall apart. Carnage approached him and lent him a portion of his power for John to survive. He then left with Kenneth. After 2 days, John suddenly woke up in the hospital from his coma. Booth got startled and immediately called the nurse's attention. John was hysterical, and Booth tried to calm him down by saying he was in the hospital and that he was safe. He told John how they found him lying on the ground in a pool of water and blood. Booth asked John if he could remember anything. John said he was sure he remembered Kenneth, but he couldn't remember who was with him as his head was still throbbing. Booth told John to relax as he had just woken up, but he refused. John told him the killer was still out there and that he had almost caught him. Booth replied, saying the blood and guts they found near him came from a top-secret asset. This resulted in Suits getting involved in their dealings, which their chief wasn't happy about. He told John to lie low and recover. Once Booth left, John got up from his bed and looked in the mirror. The doctor told him his tests returned normal, which meant Carnage must have stitched him up good. John looked at the spot where Carnage touched and immediately sent streams of thoughts to his mind. He saw images that seemed like memories, but it wasn't his. John screamed at the top of his lungs. The nurse heard it and rushed towards his room, but to her surprise, John was gone. The nurse, in a panic, called security and told them the situation. Meanwhile, John was standing on top of a building. He felt the changes Carnage made in his body. His heart was pumping on overdrive and his body was running on complete adrenaline. John was faster and stronger. He loved it. Elsewhere in a motel, Kenneth asked Carnage why he helped John survive. John would have surely died if he had not intervened. Carnage looked at Kenneth and asked why he was jealous. Kenneth stayed quiet while he let out a laugh. Carnage told him that he should take it as a compliment because it was because of him that John risked his life in the first place. He was John's dark mirror, and every time he looked at his reflection, he would see an image of Kenneth. Carnage said that he gave John power so that he could surpass Kenneth. This statement confused Neely since it would mean that John could now easily destroy him. Carnage corrected him, saying he did it so that Kenneth could transform. He told him that although he transformed his captives, he failed to transform himself. He remained the same, useless, whiny little piece of garbage that he was. Carnage threatened to leave, but Kenneth begged to be given another chance. He thought about it, and Carnage granted his wish. Carnage brought Kenneth along for one last ride. Later, Booth unlocked his door and entered his apartment. To his surprise, John was sitting on his couch looking totally fine. Booth asked John what he was doing. He said he was looking at some files and determined that remnants of Hydra Men were the top secret asset found near his body when he collapsed. Booth asked him if he was sure. John replied affirmatively, saying a symbiote was present there who said Hydra Man's name. Booth was confused. John told him he was starting to remember everything and that the symbiote and the artist were most likely working together. Booth told him not to pursue this case since it was out of their jurisdiction. They were only assigned to Kenneth Neely and nothing more. But John was determined. He told Booth he would find the symbiote first in order to find the artist. Before leaving, John told him he remembered the symbiote saying he wanted to transform himself and that Hydro Man was only the first on his list. In another part of the city, Carnage cornered Dr. On and attacked him. He was confused as he didn't understand why he was being attacked. Carnage told him he wanted to access the spotted dimension. Dr. On told him he would help him with that without the need to fight, but Carnage had other plans. Dr. On tried to enter a spot to escape, but Kenneth lunged and grabbed his leg, which prevented him from moving. Carnage let out an attack, then caught the doctor, but it also hit Kenneth's hand, slicing it off. Carnage wrapped his strands around every hole on Dr. On's body, and after it was tight, he pulled on it, which ripped Dr. On's body apart. He took the severed head to the ground and absorbed it. Meanwhile, Kenneth was in deep pain caused by his severed hand. Carnage approached him and told him that he might have it in him to become his next vessel. Kenneth looked at him with hopeful eyes and asked if he could also help with his hand. Carnage picked him up and told him it was only a scratch. He opened the spot and entered through it. In the 7th precinct, a voice was talking inside John's head. It kept telling him how messed up he was, that his mind was filled with insecurity, loneliness, sadness, and rage. John tried shaking it off, but the voice was too loud. It kept showing him malicious images of hurting his coworkers. John couldn't take it anymore and let out a loud scream which was heard all over his office. He stormed out of there and headed up the roof and stood at its edge. John asked the voice what it would take for him to shut up. The voice replied, saying he was bored and needed entertainment. It told John that Carnage and the artist were as bad as it gets, and he would need to break some rules if he wanted to stop them. After hearing this, John put on his coat and got inside his car. He asked the voice who he was, and it replied, saying he was Cletus Kasady, Carnage's former vessel. Later that day, he arrived at the scene of Kenneth's latest crime. Booth saw him and said he wasn't supposed to be there. John brushed him off and told him he was just there to watch. Booth persisted and prevented him from going any further, saying the way he involved supers on their case was spooking people. John yielded and stepped away. Booth escorted him back to his car and told him to get a vacation. John's head showed images of him beating up Booth, making him stagger. Booth asked if he was okay, to which he replied by saying he only had a headache. John got inside his car and drove away. He had what he wanted, a brochure that was out of place at the crime scene. It showed a roadmap of the area which would lead them eastward. Cletus left, saying Carnage was still following his plan. He told John that they were headed east to find Dr. Jonathan On, and knowing Carnage, they were already too late. Cletus told John to head toward the observatory and see if they could catch Carnage there. Elsewhere, in the Astronomical Observatory in New York, Kenneth demanded to know Carnage's plans as he had given up a hand for him. Carnage told him to be careful as there were people who gave up more for him than just a hand. Kenneth was embarrassed and apologized. Carnage grabbed a woman named Dr. Halliday. He told her how he saw her speech about Einstein-Rosen bridges and sending particles through dimensions, and this was when he got the idea. Carnage had felt godlike power, but the venom took it from him and became the King in Black. Cletus concocted his plan on how they could elevate themselves. They had planned that if they couldn't become a god, they would become Godkillers instead. Carnage then placed Dr. Halliday on a bench in front of monitors, telling her to power her machine up. He would then use the powers he got from Hydra Man and Dr. On to travel across space. The machine was powered up and Carnage wrapped himself around it. He grabbed Kenneth and said they were going to kill gods.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.